Thank you all for joining this session, which is, I believe, the topic that is on the top of your mind as we are closing a year 2022 and then looking forward to the next year. So I'm sure a lot of you might be in this phase where you're reflecting back on what we have achieved as part of the digital journey and what or how we have to plan for the year ahead. So I feel this session is happening at the right time where you can leverage some of this information to plan better for the activities that going forward. So once again, thanks Zinnov for making this happen, and thank you all for making it for the session. So as part of the session, I wanted to go through some of the key topics, mainly around what we see as happening around us in terms of the digital transformation and how or why FinOps is needed and what are the values that FinOps brings to the table. And we will, as we progress through the presentation, we will get to know, where you are in this journey and how we can help you started in this journey. So how do I start with the FinOps practice? And last but not the least, I want to leave you with some case studies, data points that brings out the values and benefits of taking a FinOps-backed decision for your digital transformation. So starting with how, we have gone through this phase of pandemic and how customers, enterprises have transformed themselves. Like we as individuals have experienced this digital transformation happening all around us. Be it, the way we are consuming a lot of these services, whether it is personal healthcare or buying online. We see that, pandemic in one way has accelerated this move by enterprises to go digital. So more and more companies, enterprises are reaching out to their customers to offer what is like a personalized, individualized capabilities that we are providing today. So as part of this digital transformation, there are mainly two high-level trends that we are observing. One, the transformation or everything that is getting onto online or digital is getting accelerated like 27 times, or in cases where you look at industries across the board, whether it is telco, banking, healthcare, oil and industries, or energy and utilities. All of these industries are going through this transformation. So the other key aspects that we see is also they are moving from what was like long-running projects to delivering digital products. So what do you mean by digital products? These are specific, unique capabilities that their end customers can consume online. So this is what major trend. So you're moving from project-based implementations, which were probably easy to track and manage from a funding forecasting perspective, to pointed digital products. And all of it is being powered by public cloud. So when I say all of it is being powered by public cloud, there is, again, the journey to cloud that is happening across all of the enterprises. And cloud is no longer what you call like a technology option out there. It is becoming a mandate, or it is becoming a necessity to survive in this digital transformation part. So why public cloud? again, when we look at the ways that digital or IT has transformed over these years, the consumption and the delivery models have changed drastically. And I would say this is something very similar to what ATMs have done for the banking industry. So I suspect if anybody goes to the bank these days to get their work done, but all of it is delivered, or all of the services are delivered through ATMs. In a similar case, we are at this tipping point where we see this cloud consumption is going to exponentially grow in terms of the putting the digital products on the cloud. So why cloud, and why this tipping point? There are a few other factors contributing to this, mainly around the cloud economics. So cloud, as we know from a technology standpoint, it is elastic. You can scale it, you can shrink it, you can actually use it as required by your workload. But the key value that cloud is bringing to the table is around the pay-as-you-go model. So converting your CapEx to an OpEx model. This is the most appealing factor that is that we are seeing. And now no longer people have sorted the way that they had the main objections for cloud, whether it is security, compliance. You've got everything in cloud, and that is becoming a tipping point. So the numbers there, as you can see, that the projected is about 661 billion spending in public cloud. So I'm not talking about private cloud. That's also stuff that is happening where we see customers consolidating their infrastructure and going through that. So what we see as part of, if you sort of blueprint these enterprises, we see a pattern where you have the classic enterprises which had most of their IT on the on-prem to companies that are on the extreme right, which are like the born in the cloud sort of candidates. So how do we operate, or how you as leaders operate these companies will vary depending on the model or where you fit in this model. Say, if it is like a classic IT-driven company, you have your own planning cycle, and you have exact, complete visibility into where your spending is going to, and what are the products or the projects that you are going to execute. Whereas on the digital side, you're looking at a more agile way of doing things, where you have products coming every day, every week, or updates or code actually being pushed out into production every day. So if you look at some of the bought in the cloud companies, there are changes like up till 200 features or changes that are pushed into production every week. That was in the scenario sometime back. When we look at classic or legacy enterprises, there will be one or two products that are coming out, or two versions of a product coming out in a year. So then we have the models that is somewhere in the middle, which we call it hybrid, which has some footprint on the current environment and some footprint on the cloud. So how has been the consumption model with these models? So in the traditional model, IT finance used to be the control point where all of the line of business would raise their requirement with IT finance, and then whatever is needed for the teams are ordered, procured, and delivered by IT finance with the support of the infrastructure team. And then the application teams builds on top of that. So this obviously, there are long procurement cycle, high cost of failure, and a lot of time spent on the approvals, and which actually sort of decelerates the speed at which the company wants to innovate. Now, if you look at the extreme right around the how some of these digital enterprises are doing or building products, the engineers are the empowered entities, where the engineers have the power to build solutions which can serve 5 people, 500 people, 5,000 people, or even 5 million people. So they have the power, or the developers are the empowered people with the code, with stuff like infrastructure as code. They are able to spin off these huge infrastructure in matter of minutes, where it took months to get a server, a rack delivered and installed and all of that. The modern developer has the power in his or her hands to actually spin off these infrastructure where they have to run these applications. So what then typically is happening is this, the IT finance or the CISO team or the CIO team also are unaware of some of the IT usage by the line of business teams. And then you have a lot of what you call the shadow IT in progress. So we've looked at both these models. Then there are these challenges with cloud. There are these positives with cloud. So how do we see we can bring the good part of both these models together? So again, diving deep on some of these challenges, of course, I mentioned we are giving the power to the hands of the developer. The most important thing there is like the spend, or the, from a finance person's perspective, one, he or she doesn't have the visibility on what is going to be the spend. How huge is that spend going to be, or what is the, when is that cost going to hit my books? So he's always, having sleepless nights, or thinking about what is that next cost going to come and hit me the next day morning, right? So one is the visibility part, the important one. Second is because of this dynamic nature of cloud, it is very, very unpredictable. And of course, there are different complexities with the cloud pricing models. Like some of these you pay by the hour, some of it you pay by the the amount of storage that you're using, the amount of memory that you're using, or some of it you might actually pay by the number of users that you're supporting. So based on what is it that you're consuming as a cloud service, your billing model changes, your consumption model changes. So there is challenges across the board. And if the engineer, from an engineer's perspective, this is a cool thing that he or she can spin up whatever the resources that they need to build the applications quickly. But this lacks if he or she doesn't have the visibility around what is the project goal and the objectives, that is not properly communicated. We end up in a situation where you're overspending or blowing the profit off. Finally, the main concern is like there is less visibility into these resources, and there is a concern around, are we paying the right amount for the resources for what we are using, and are we using the resources properly? So these were ready-made answers for the finance or the CIO team earlier, but with cloud and its dynamic nature, it is very difficult for the team to get a clear picture on what is happening on the ground. And most importantly, the business doesn't have a view around, okay, I'm spending so much of money. Am I getting the right value out of this investment? How are my business-led initiatives doing? So there is less visibility on this front. So, so to set the context, we are talking about the impacted parties, the IT finance team, the business, and the IT and the engineering team. They have their own objectives. And from this call, I also want to do a quick poll from you all to understand how many of you are from the finance side, how many of you are from the business side, and how many of you are from the engineering side. So if you can quickly answer these poll question that Avinash has put on the table. So to recap the context, so Avinash, I hope the poll has got out. And so we have a mix of business leaders, representatives from the finance team, and representatives from the engineering team. So I'm glad to share that this is the presentation that is bringing all of these teams together. All of these teams together in the context of how do we unlock the real value of cloud. Primarily, there are these challenges that we talked about, and the answers to those challenges is what is going to be the next part of the presentation. So how do we address this? So the industry is going through this model, which is defined as FinOps, which is actually bringing finance and operations together. And by the definition of FinOps as defined by the FinOps.org, it's an evolving financial management discipline or cultural practice that is bringing these teams together, the business, the finance, and the IT side of it together, so that you can collaborate and make right data-driven decisions. Data-driven decisions ensuring that each dollar or each rupee that you are spending is contributing to the business objective. So how do you, so we will go through these parts as we talk about. So comparing to the previous model, so we had the earlier model where IT finance was making the calls. Then you saw how DevOps or the engineer was making the calls. So the FinOps model talks about bringing these two teams together in terms of understanding the spend and making sure that the it's not impacting the speed at which you are delivering these digital capabilities for your business. So all of you would be measured under different scales based on your function. Like IT finance manager will be looking at how is he optimizing the fund? Am I spending the right amount? Am I taking all the advantages of getting all the discounts and getting all the or leveraging all the pricing models out there? Whereas the business leader has his evaluation based on how many of the digital innovations that I can put out, and that too, all of us are under pressure to do more with less. Whereas the IT manager has to ensure that whatever spend that we are making on the cloud, that is empowering the enterprise to address more business. So the value from cloud comes from bringing all of these things together. So we talked about FinOps as a concept or a practice to bring all of these things together. So when we say, what does it mean by bringing all of these things together? It involves bringing the people, the process, and the tools together. So the like I said, each of you coming from different verticals in your department have different objectives to cater to. So the where do I start with FinOps and how do I do this? There is detailed detailed guidance that is provided as part of the FinOps Foundation. I will talk more about FinOps Foundation and as we go through this FinOps operating model. So at a high level, we split this process or this discipline into 3 phases, which would be the inform phase, the optimize phase, and the operate phase. The inform phase, basically, the first thing that we need is to get insight into what is my spend. So that is what the inform phase is all about, which is getting details around how much is my spend for the day, spend for the week, or spend for the year, and how can I allocate this cost to multiple of my departments. So again, if we try to compare it with the traditional model, if I was building a solution for the marketing team, I clearly know what are the IT expenses and IT and other expenses that are required to build that application. And that would be completely charged back to that particular department, which is owning that application and which is owning the business value out of that application. Whereas in a cloud world, the cloud economics or the cloud benefits come from the scale part, as well as the more you share, the better is the price, or the better is the economics out of sharing. So you will see that there is more there is more value in using a SaaS application compared to a infrastructure application, etc. So what we are trying to do is like how to share the resources across all the departments, and then improve the utilization of those resources, and thus improve the unit cost of running an application. So in this model, the challenge comes back to how do I get a clear visibility and how do I allocate a specific cost to a particular department. So that's the first piece of the challenge, or the inform phase. So coming back to the earlier model, if you have to do it in a cloud model, if an application infrastructure is shared by marketing, HR, and let's say product team, now I need a way to split these costs across these different departments and be able to do what is called a showback or chargeback to these departments. So it will be a showback in cases where the funding is done centrally and then managed across different teams. It will be a chargeback if you want to recover that cost from that specific department. So that's the first phase, which includes understanding these costs and doing these allocations. The second phase is about optimize. The optimize phase actually gets into identifying what are the resources that I'm using, and then look at am I fully utilizing all of those resources. There are 2 levers that we look at, right? One, am I overusing the resources, or are the resources of the right size that I need? Like if I need a 1 CPU, 4 GB memory machine to run my application, Am I using 16 CPU and 16 or 180 GB memory server for running this application? So the costing model for these servers, how do you procure this in cloud? Everything changes. So the optimize phase looks at what is your workload? Are you using the right resources and of the right size to run your workloads? And finally, the optimized size identifies what are those things that have to do to make sure that the resources are used correctly. The last phase is actually executing those recommendations and generating those values, or the generating those you can say, you can think of it that savings, realizing those savings. That is what is happening in the operate phase. So it's a simple model. So the key takeaway from the session is like, if you have to start FinOps, you start with getting a visibility into your spend. Then you look at ways to optimize your spend, and then you actually execute those recommendations and get to realizing those cost benefits. So some of you who are not familiar with the domain, once you get into this practice, there are a few terms that you might come across, which is good to go through a brief introduction to all of these terms. Like, for instance, some of the folks on the finance side will already know about, what is a capex and opex, like, what is your capital expenditure versus operating expenditure, which is going to hit you every day, every minute, every hour sort of thing, versus capital expense, which is like something that you buy or invest in an assets for a long term. Then I already talked about the chargeback and showback. And as you're consuming from a cloud catalog, there are various options in which you can buy these resources. Like you can you can get the resource immediately as and when you need it, but you pay what is like an on-demand rate for those resources. Then talking about how do I save in the cloud world, there are stuff that the cloud service providers, whether it is the Amazon, Google, or Azure, or IBM, provides you facilities that, based on your cloud usage patterns, you have the potential to save money. So these are things like, reservation plans, reserved instances, savings plans, which essentially means that that's when the true, what you call the cloud economics comes into the picture. If you are consuming more, the CSP will provide you more discounts or give it to you at a lesser discounted, lesser price. Then if you're committing for a certain usage, they will give you a commitment based discount. So these are some basic capabilities that we should know how that we will leverage in the FinOps phases. Then, of course, I talked about two levers. One is like, what is it that I'm spending on the cloud resources? So first thing is to look at reducing the wastage and making sure that I'm using only the right set of resources. I'm not using anything greater or anything lesser, but I'm using the right set of resources. The second is about making sure that what I'm paying for those resources are I'm paying the best price for those resources. So to bring these two levers together, you have to understand like the pricing models and the some of these definitions in the third block there. Like there will be certain cases, if you are committing upfront, you pay for an amount, pay for a resource upfront for a committed usage, you get a better cost. And then you sort of amortize that cost across the billing period or across different departments based on that usage. So and then again, you have blended and unblended rates. Unblended rates will be the raw rate, like you use 16 CPUs, this is your cost. If you use 4 CPUs, this is your cost. But blended will bring all of these pricing models and the discounts together to say, like, what is your normalized cost per CPU or per infrastructure or per service. It could be a database service, it could be a storage service, whatever you are using. The last three tags, the three bullets in the third column, are again important important building blocks for a FinOps model, which includes like tagging all of your resources. What is tagging? Tagging is basically using a key value pair to adding additional attributes to your cloud resources, so you can quickly identify what is this resource and which team is owning this and which initiative or which business goals it is tagged to. So you will also come across what is called COGS, which is the cost of goods sold, which drives into the unit economics as well. So primarily so I'm mainly from an IT background, but from a finance perspective, the simple equation that I know is like you have a price, and that is what you quoted to your external customers, and you have a cost of building that product. So that is your cost, or the cost of the good. So the price minus the cost is your profit. So the more you can decrease the cost, because the price point is derived or driven by the market dynamics, but the cost is something that you have control on. So how do you drive down your cost and improve the cost of serving your customers? So that is what is the unit economics and the costs is all about. So there are detailed explanation of these terms you will find that in your in the FinOps.org site as well. So let's now dig deeper into some of these terms that we discussed, that the cloud is dynamic compared to the static world that we know of in the traditional side. So just a quick peek or a sneak peek into what forms a cloud bill. So as you can see here, if your spending is around 10 million in the cloud, you are required to go through something like 6 million rows of bill or bill details that will have, each entry has a unique resource ID. It also talks about when did you start using that resources, what is the stop time, what is the basic rate for that. So depending on the service that you are consuming, the rates are going to be different based on certain parameters, and the rate into the time for which that you are using will give you the cost of it. So like that, a modern application would have several thousands of resources, and each of these resources, some of these might come up in different regions. You are serving customers across multiple regions, multiple locations. Then these resources, some of it might come up during, like, you are having your end of the month payroll run. So it might be running just for the 3 days and then goes away. But your bill has all of these details. Now, for an individual person to make sense out of all of these things, or a team of people to make sense out of these humongous Excel sheet, is practically not possible. So that is where the third part that I was mentioning. So you have the people, you have the process part that we talked about. Then you need the tools and the related capabilities to go through each of these phases of FinOps. So again, a recap around these three phases that I mentioned and the possibilities here. The inform phase actually gets you visibility into the cost, which is like total how much am I spending? Who are the top cost drivers for me? Like I'm consuming so many things from AWS, I'm consuming so many from GCP. Among these services, which are my top cost drivers? And then I would need a way to bring this back to my business, as in like I have these 5 business unit. Which business unit is spending the most? And are they the right people driving the outcomes or the deliverables? So for that, again, we have to have a ways to tag these expenses and the resources so that they can be shown up on a dashboard like this, which gives you a true cost split up. As in, so you have to have a tagging strategy in place, which will allow you to tag the resources not only from a technology standpoint, as in these are EC2 instances, these are containers or things like that, but you have to have a way to understand which EC2 instances are being used by which of these services. So that is where the inform phase comes in. Then again, talking about cloud challenges, you can see the container cost allocation stuff. So for a finance persona, moving from a physical server to a virtual server, it's like a big jump. Now we are talking about moving to containers. Again, the concept of containers similar to what I was giving an example on SaaS. It is like the more you share, the more you gain, or the lesser cost you pay. So containers are a way that you can pack more executables into a single machine. So virtual machines allowed you to, like if a physical server allowed you to pack like 8 virtual machines in a box, containers will allow you to pack like 80 containers in a box. Or these containers are actually the pods that are, or the, in a technical term, the component that is serving the capability of the applications. So this allows you to do what is called a horizontal scaling mechanism. So your application is highly available, scalable, and all of that. So this is all good from an engineering perspective. But again, if you come back and wear your finance hat and look at it, we are running 3,000 containers. So can you tell me how many of these containers are being used by HR team? How many of these containers are used by marketing team? And how many of these are used by my production or the shop floor team? So it's going to be a difficult puzzle. But the question that the finance person is asking is very simple. Tell me how much I have spent on containers. Out of that, how much should I allocate to these departments? So those are the hard puzzles that we solve in this phase. And like I'm showing here, the tools that we have actually help you do that in terms of visualizing the spend as well as allocating to various segments. Then the next part in this phase that we talked about is around the optimize. So the keyword here is right-sizing the instances and services. And also it matters where do you place the right workload. So for the 2 levers that I kept saying, like, what are those underutilized resources? So like if you have some development test servers, shut them down during if they are not used. And then for the running stuff, understand the way in which they are used. So you get a trending model and then look at, can I run it on a lesser configuration machine and save money? What are my risks related to that? These are all the right sizing capabilities that you have to be looking at. And in the optimized phase also, you need certain hooks to know if you are spending more than the budget for that initiative. How do you do that? Finally, the operate phase we talked about is where the actual the rubber hits the road, where we realize the savings. So these engineers have to be motivated, encouraged to apply the recommendations to enable the organization to save money. So this also involves a lot of communication, a lot of cultural changes and governance and controls to be put in place. So these are the three parts. And just recapping the principles of how FinOps have some of these principles have used to drive the setup of the practice, mainly around, we just saw the teams needs to collaborate. So we all know how DevOps have changed the way that we are building and deploying to cloud. So earlier days, development used to create the product, take it, throw it off the wall to the operations teams to run it. But in the cloud world, you can't do this at the pace that the cloud is moving, that you take the product, give it off to another support and operations teams to run it. That doesn't work that way. So the same team actually started doing development and operations, and then DevOps was born. And we are already seeing the way how automated and seamlessly this is working for cloud. Same thing needs to happen for FinOps, where we need the finance and the IT teams, the engineering team and the business to come together to keep that pace, at the same time not slowing you down on the decision making. And typically we have found a small centralized team driving this works better, but the responsibility or the culture to have take ownership of my spend has to be with every engineer, every person, every finance person, every business leader owns that responsibility. So these are some of the principles that we can look at. So some of you might have this question in your mind related to TBM and FinOps. Just a slide showing the complementary views of these two disciplines. As you can see, the TBM is looking at the total cost or the entire IT spend, whereas FinOps is currently focused on mainly the cloud financial management or the spend that you are doing in the cloud. And in terms of the frequency and the time at which you look at these dashboards could vary, like TBM could be, again, that is also evolving, like it could be a daily, monthly sort of thing, whereas cloud finance, you need to have a close monitor as in terms of daily, hourly cost and daily trends. So quickly, before I close, I just want to give you a sneak peek of a few case studies. So as our CTO puts it, Apptio itself is one of the, we will say like zero customer for the capabilities that we build in the TBM and FinOps space. In a traditional business, started off with project-based stuff. But today we are looking at a digitalized or a transformed company providing a platform where we are serving 2,000 plus customers, 35,000 plus users, and the amount of data that we are analyzing, like it runs into several trillion billing records. So this involves use of a lot of cloud resources, and in fact, we've moved out of like 5 data centers and we are moved out into the cloud. I'm doing into the cloud, and again, it's not a single cloud, it is like a multi-cloud architecture, and then we are leveraging close to or more than 50 plus cloud services. So doing this, so if you put yourself in the CFO, CTO hat, doing this on a profitable basis, you need to get information around how are each of my services doing. And we have like 200 plus microservices, adopted the latest Kubernetes platforms, running on containers, all of that. So you need, like I was mentioning, you need tools that also needs to support the people and process and the cultural changes as well. So would be happy to talk about more about some of these capabilities. I also want to show you one client use case, which is Coach. They are a multi-billion conglomerate serving the industrial segment, and they were also pushed to move to cloud to from a company or the enterprise standpoint. They had multiple line of businesses, and they were all testing the waters with cloud, with some of the credits that they would have got from different CSPs. But all of a sudden, that had to be made enterprise ready, and it was difficult for the customer to do all of this with Excel sheets. As I've already shown you, like going through several millions of lines through Excel sheet, even if you put 15 people to do that work, it's a lot of manual effort, and the accuracy, and if the finance person needs the numbers by this date, it is not practically going to be possible. And worst part, you wouldn't know how much you're spending, and if there will be a lot of surprises. So what Coach did was to form a small FinOps team, having representatives from each of these practices, and they leverage Cloudability as a product. So Cloudability is Apptio's product around which talks about how you get visibility across multiple of these clouds. And then again, they applied those two levers. One, how much resources are we using? And then they started looking at how can I pay less for these resources. So first thing, all the stuff that is not needed during weekends, and bring them up. And then look at how can I pay less for these resources. So look at using all of the resources that are being used across these departments, bring them together, and then sort of use reserved instances, savings plan. By just doing these two fundamental things, they were able to save like 10 million in the first 90 days itself. So this is then again goes into the culture of like what you call as the something like the Toyota Pires model. Like you get to see how much is being used, etc., and then accordingly drive those things. So those are the key some references. We also have a lot of FinOps references that you will find. So from a FinOps perspective, what are those indicators that will give you the trust in your digital transformation? A few of these things, like am I getting real-time visibility into my spend? Does the teams understand the spend based on actual consumption? And then are you paying less for what you are using, or are you using all of these levers? So once you have that, you have a way to also link it back to the spend and the business values delivered. So there is lots more to talk about FinOps. The best thing is like FinOps.org. is a site that you can go to and understand some of these terms. I know this time is not enough to go through all of these details, but this is a fantastic set of material out there for you, which is curated by the experts, the people who are practicing FinOps, real world stories and expertise. So with that, I will pause the presentation. Once again, thank you for taking time at this crucial time where you are looking back at the year gone by and planning for the next year. I thought this was just the right time to talk about FinOps. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Open the last few minutes for some questions.
Thank you so much, Sreekanth. It's a really insightful session. We encourage our audience to keep dropping in their questions in the chat box to keep the conversation going. For the ones asking for the presentation or recording of the session, please drop us a note to events@zinnov.com. We'll keep you posted on the same. Sri, let's just get started with the question that we have in hand, right? One, in terms of FinOps adopter site, in getting engineers, developers, and other people within technology groups involved in the practice of cloud financial management as a most significant challenge in the FinOps adoption, right? What are your thoughts on the same, and how did your team manage hiring the right people?
Great question. So, like I said, this is not about just the the tools or the process alone. It is also important, who are the players that you bring in. So the people part of it. I think the question relates to the people part of it. So I'll just go back to those principles again. It's a critical decision that you take around how do you seed a small team and then have this team take these messages to the masses, as in like to all other teams. And and how do you, to your question around how do you hire these engineers? So we know each of these engineers will be focused around what is their core job, but elevating their knowledge to and make them realize how their work is impacting the business and how they have to be cost conscious or like FinOps driven is going to be the key for success of this building this culture across the enterprise. So the model, like I said, has worked with multiple of these customers. Is like they start small. They start with something like you can put it as a crawl, walk, run model. They start small with a small team. And then you have the data to speak for itself. They do the savings. They show it back. See, I have saved $40,000 for the company this month. And then you make them empowered. So they know that they are empowered to spend. At the same time, they are empowered to save.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much for that, Sreekanth. These are for the companies who haven't started their entire FinOps journey, right? For the ones who haven't started, how do you think that they can embark on the entire journey of FinOps? What are your thought process? Because you have been during this journey in Apptio, so let us know your thought process around it.
Fantastic. So again, those who have already started on this, so probably you're in the crawl or walk phase of it. So the actual value comes out when you start implementing the recommendations or the insights that you are getting out of analyzing your bills and utilization. So I think the way that we can automate this, so the small steps that we are doing within our own team, engineering teams, is like looking at the unit economics of how we are delivering a capability to a client. So how much does it cost me to serve one client? Are there ways that I can optimize the resources? Is there any design changes that I can make to bring the cost down? Or is there any operational changes that I can do to keep the cost down? So these are things that will help me, engineer those things. and then realize those savings. And the realization of savings, why I keep stressing on it, like it is, you have to do that in that right time. If you miss that window, you lost an opportunity to save that money. So if your FinOps dashboard says that you have a potential saving opportunity here, you have to act on it immediately. So that's where the automation and stuff comes into play that will help you.
I'm just going to expand the question a little bit, Sreekanth. So, what do you think are the basic infrastructure that has to be kept in place before we embark on this journey, right? Can you just double click on that?
Yeah. So from a infrastructure perspective, like I said, things like you need a dashboard that is giving you a big picture view around what is my spend and which are my cost drivers. That is the step one. Second building block you need, we talked about the dynamicity of cloud. So it is not that my next bill will come a month later. There could be something that somebody might trigger in the engineering team that will cost you a big amount the next hour. So you need tools in place that can alert you whenever you are going out of track. So setting up these anomaly alerts is another important thing. Then we already talked about the team and the people part, which is looking at it from a enterprise-wide and looking for savings opportunities. Like how can I bring certain parts together and save money for the company as a whole? Like these are the foundation building blocks that you need.
So as you were speaking about it, how much do you think a finance person needs to be aware of the cloud terminologies when he talks to an IT or engineering team, right? And in order to just ensure he influence the decision making, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I said, there are few finance terms that the engineers needs to learn, and there are few engineering terms that the finance person also need to learn, so that they can come across as intelligent people when they are having those conversation with the engineers. It's not again, it's not rocket science. So some of the fundamental principle is that you account for what is delivered during that period. So that's something that finance people have it in their blood. But how do you do that on a cloud model? They just need to understand the pieces. That's it. Because they shouldn't be just overwhelmed with the cloud terms and all that.
Of course. How important is choosing a right FinOps platform for your company, right? And what are the ones available in India based on your experience?
Yeah. So, like I've been saying, that it's people, processes, and tools. So selecting the platform is critical. It's critical from multiple things. Like one, you also don't have to spend a lot of time analyzing and stuff if a third party or a tool can provide you those insights. So I wouldn't call it a tool, but like you rightly said, you have to look at it as a platform. So mainly a platform because there is what this platform is doing is allowing you to ingest cost and utilization information from multiple of the vendors that you have. So today we know none of the enterprises is relying on one or two vendors for their IT supply. So it is coming from 80, 100 different vendors. Now you need to have a platform in which you can take all of these cost information at the rate and time at which you need it, like whether it is 4 times a day or 6 times a day, you need this information to be flowing into this platform and be able to analyze it and look at it from multiple capabilities and be able to share those actionable insights to the dashboard. So there is an interesting blog about what are the, maybe after this call, I will share those links. So what are the things that you should look at when selecting a FinOps platform? So to your question around who are the major players here, like what I see, especially in India, like people are either developing some of their custom or Excel sheet has been the major tools that they have been using. But if you are doing multiple clouds, then platforms like Cloudability makes sense. If you are on individual clouds, the cloud provider itself provides some basic capabilities like the Cost Explorer or Cost Analytics Center. By whether it is AWS, Azure, and GCP, they provide some basic cost view. But if you want to bring all of this together and look at it together, you need a platform.
Got it. Thanks for that, Sreekanth. As we were talking about the spend optimization, sometimes spend optimization often becomes a lower priority in the ranking below in terms of the performance or the ease of access to the infrastructure resources, right? Companies tend to view responding to the market demands and competitive pressures as goal one, while controlling the cost comes as later, right? In those cases, how do you ensure the accountability of this entire adaptation matters to the company, right? What are your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, my take, here again, wearing the hat of a developer versus the hat of a business leader. What would be, as a developer, I would like to keep my freedom, as in like freedom to innovate, freedom to, spin up some resources and experiment and, get the product out. So any restrictions coming in as part of a spend restriction would be impacting my speed, right? Whereas from a business perspective, I need visibility and I don't need surprises. So the model I think that will work is like if you leave it open initially and then try to see that you can close into on the spend, it's going to be a very difficult challenge. And that is what we see a lot of the customers facing, where they didn't have a visibility to the spend and they gave free hands, and then now trying to see where can I bring down the cost. And then that also has a cultural implication that for the person on the ground will feel that I've been denied certain things. Instead, it is better to put these good practices upfront, that you do a proper planning. Some of these stuff like cloud financial planning is coming into the front these days. Again, as we are all doing this fall planning exercise, we know exactly how much, or we are able to forecast our spend and then put controls or guardrails around those spend quotas. That's the way to go about it.
Got it. So also based on your experience, how useful do you think billing dashboards are, and also the trend forecasted by the dashboard within cloud?
I didn't catch the last part. Trend forecasted by?
Trend forecasted by the dashboard within the cloud.
Yeah, so interesting thing is like lot of these forecast again looks at how you have been doing in the past, right? So you have been, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Like you have done so much, you have spent 200K last month. This month also is going to be 200K if you are doing the same business, nothing changing. But we all know that is not the situation. So there are several initiatives that are happening around. So you need a way to do this more intelligently in terms of, whether it is the raw materials cost going up or whether it is related to the new initiatives that you're taking up. So this model of forecasting has to bring all of these things together so that you can get a more accurate cloud financial planning done for the future. But you will be able to at least position yourself around what is going to be my approx spend based on historical data.
Got it. So at what stage do you think we can combine the capacity planning and cloud finance planning?
Great. This is a difficult question. This is again requires a lot of what you call the engineering and finance teams involvement. So I would typically start a capacity planning from the engineering side to understand how the workload has been doing, and then look at putting that workload and the scale needed. Like if I'm going from like 500 users to 5,000 users, like, or we move from like 1,000 customers to 2,000 customers. If I required X to support 1,000 customers, I need how much resources I need to support 2,000 customers. Again, obviously, it may not be linear in that sense. So some of these capabilities that I talked about related to containerizing your workload, because when you are running it as containerized workload, the platform, the Kubernetes itself take care of the scale and all of that. So what you need is like then the capacity question is taken care, but you need to have a way to do the allocation that I talked about. So that way you can bring the, leverage the industry platforms to do the capacity planning, and then have a way to bring that cost part together.
Got it. Thank you so much for your insights, Sreekanth. And that's it we have for you today. It was extremely thought-provoking session and we had quite a bit of takeaways. Thank you so much once again. It was an absolute pleasure to host you. And to the ones who joined us today, hope you found today's session insightful. Thank you once again. See you in our next Zinnov webinar. Take care and stay safe and have a great week ahead. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you all.